Manjeet Kaur.
And my name is Gurnam Singh.
Welcome to the One Show.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਊਅਰਸ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਬ੍ਰੌਡਕਾਸਟ ਚੈਨਲ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ, ਨਿੱਘਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ। ਔਰ ਅੱਜ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਹਰ ਮਨਜੀਤ ਹਰ ਹਫਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਮਾਜਿਕ ਪਰਿਵਾਰਕ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੁੰਦੇ, ਬਹੁਤ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ, ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਵੀ ਔਖੀ ਹੋਇਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸ਼ਰਮਾ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲੇ ਛਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਨਾਲੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਉਹ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਬਾਹਰਲੇ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਜਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਵਰਤਦੇ ਸੋਸ਼ਲ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਮਾਜਿਕ, ਉਹ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਈਕੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਹੋਣ ਜਾਂ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਦਾ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ
ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਐਕਸਪਲੇਨ ਕਰਨਾ ਔਖਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ।
ਹੁਣ ਅੱਜ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਆ ਉਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਕਰੀਨ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਪੈਰੈਂਟਲ ਏਲੀਏਨੇਸ਼ਨ। ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਏਲੀਏਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਕੀ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ, ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਵਿਗਿਆਨਗੀ ਕਰਨੀ, ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਜਦੋਂ ਮਾਂ ਬਾਪ ਜਾਂ ਮਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਬਾਪ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਫ਼ਰਤ ਕਰਾਉਣੀ, ਬੇਗਾਨਾ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਿਰ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਸੈਪਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਇਹ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ। ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੋਲੀ ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕੰਨ ਭਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਉਹਦੇ ਅਗੇਂਸਟ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਾ ਦੂਜੇ ਪੈਰੈਂਟ ਦੇ। ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਕਸਪਲੋਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨਾ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀਏ, ਵੈਸੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਕੋਈ ਕ੍ਰਿਮੀਨਲ ਲਾਅ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਪਰ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਲਾਅ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਲ ਵਿਗਿਆਨਗੀ ਜਾਂ ਏਲੀਏਨੇਸ਼ਨ, ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਇੱਕ ਏਜੰਸੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਕਾਫਕਾਸ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ, Children and Family Advisory and Support Services, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਰੈਕਗਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਰਿਪੋਰਟਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੈਪਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਡਿਵੋਰਸ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਕੇਸਿਸ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲਸ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਲਿਖਦੇ ਆ ਬੱਚੇ ਤੇ, ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਸ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਲਿਖਦੇ ਹੁਣ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਵੱਖਰੇ, ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਰਿਪੋਰਟ ਕੋਰਟ ਨੂੰ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ। ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਆ, ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਟਰੀਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ,
ਅਪਬ੍ਰਿੰਗਿੰਗ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਰਲ ਮਿਲ ਕੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹਦਾ
ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਦਤ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਨਾ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਇਸ਼ੂ, ਹੁਣ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਚੇਤਾ ਜੋ ਪਹਿਲੀਆਂ ਚ ਚਾਈਲਡ ਅਬਿਊਜ਼ ਹੋਣਾ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਗੋਰਿਆਂ ਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, ਸਾਡੇ ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਸਾਡੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ, ਸਾਡੇ ਚ ਤਾਂ ਸ਼ਰਮ ਆ। ਪਰ ਇਹ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਸਾਡੇ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੀ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ, ਰਿਸਰਚ ਹੈ, ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਪਤਾ ਕਰੂੰਗੇ ਅੱਜ ਵੀ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਤਾਂ। ਤੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚਦਾ ਜਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਇਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜੜ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੱਜ਼ਤ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਢੱਕਦੇ ਇੱਜ਼ਤ ਦੇ, ਸਾਡੀ ਇੱਜ਼ਤ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੰਮ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਵਾਧਾ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਜਦੋਂ ਨਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਿਆਹ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ ਨਾਤੇ, ਫਿਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਫਿਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਰਾਜਿਆਂ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਦੂਜੇ ਨੂੰ ਟਰੀਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਫਿਰ ਗੜਬੜ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਹੀ ਪੁੱਠਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ, ਫਿਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੰਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਦੇ ਸਿਰਾਂ 'ਚ ਗਲੀਆਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਡੋਨਟ ਡੂ ਐਨੀਥਿੰਗ ਇਨ ਹਾਫਸ, ਜਾਂ ਉੱਧਰ ਜਾਂ ਉੱਧਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ। ਪਰ ਪਤਾ ਕੀ ਆ, ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਰੋ, ਪਰ ਵਿਚਕਾਰ ਬੱਚੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਜਦੋਂ ਵਿਚਕਾਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਵਿਚਕਾਰ ਬੱਚੇ ਹੋਣ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ। ਸੋ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਹੁਣ ਇੱਜ਼ਤ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਸਿਹਤ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ। ਸੋ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ। ਤੇ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਓਬਵੀਅਸਲੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲਸ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ। ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਅੱਜ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਬਿਮਾਰੀਆਂ ਦੱਸਣੀਆਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਹੱਲ ਵੀ ਕੱਢੂਗੇ, ਯੂ ਨੋ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਐਟ ਦੀ ਐਂਡ ਆਫ ਦ ਡੇ, ਯੂ ਨੋ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਸਰੀਰਕ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਹੋਵੇ, ਬੋਡੀਲੀ ਇਲਨੈਸ ਜਾਂ ਦਿਮਾਗ, ਨਹੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੀਵੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਇਜ਼ ਬੈਟਰ ਦੈਨ ਕਿਉਰ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੀ ਨਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਸੁਖੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਦੋ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੈਸਟ ਨੇ, ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਆਮ kind of really pleased to say that both of our guests are really the kind of top dogs, if you like. I don't know if the dog's the right word.
That doesn't sound right.
Well, we'll let them say whether that's the right. They're both leading professionals in this field, and we're very lucky to have them. So, sab to pehla I'm going to welcome Baldeep Singh. Welcome to the show. Hanji, Vaheguru ji ka khalsa, Vaheguru ji ki fateh. Yeah, top dog barrister. I'll just tell you about. He's an international family law barrister at number 5 Chambers, based in London. And he's actually renowned for his expertise in cross-border family disputes and human rights law. You know, he's got lots of distinguished accolades. He's the founder and chair of Sikhs in Law. He was appointed Chief Judge of the Sikh Court. And through these roles, Baldeep has become a leading voice for culturally sensitive approaches to justice, particularly matters of affecting family and children. And with Biljit, we've got Cam Kaur. Welcome again, Makam. Again, one of our regulars. Cam is a leading social work consultant specialising in supporting children and families in care, on the brink of care. But she's also involved in therapeutic interventions and support through understanding the challenges that children face. And she also manages a team of expert social care consultants at Parenting Apart. So lots of experience. And later on, we will take some calls. So ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਐਡਵਾਈਸ ਵੀ ਲੈਣਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਜਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੋਵੇ, ਪਰ ਇਹ ਆ ਵੀ ਕੰਫੀਡੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲਟੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ, ਕੋਈ ਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਨਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸ ਦਾ ਨਾਂ ਲੈਣਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਅੱਧੇ ਘੰਟੇ ਬਾਅਦ। ਸੋ ਸਾਡਾ ਘੰਟੇ ਦਾ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਆ, ਜੇ ਕਾਲਸ ਆ ਗਈਆਂ ਮਨਜੀਤ ਆਪਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਵਧਾ ਵੀ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ 9 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ, 9:15 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਚੱਲੂਗੇ। ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਬਲਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰੂੰਗੀ। ਆਪਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਲ alienation, sorry it's a bit hard to say this one, alienation, and how ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਇਹ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ, ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ during or after divorce
or separation.
Well, as you've said, I'm a specialist in family law and a divorce lawyer. Anbanta ho jandi hai, you know, people grow apart, there's issues in relationships, and usually one of the products of a marriage and a relationship is children.
Of course
what happens to them when two adults relationship has ended? ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦਾ relationship ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ end ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ parents ਦੇ ਨਾਲ। So the alienating behaviour starts ਕਿ ਕੰਨ ਭਰਨੇ, as you've said already,
brainwash ਕਰਨਾ।
Exactly. So dad's family or dad may say ਤੇਰੀ ਮਾਂ ਏਦਾਂ, mum or her family may say ਤੇਰਾ ਪਿਓ ਏਦਾਂ। Okay, so when they start hearing these negative comments, of course it's going to impact them. It's not a healthy relationship.
No, it isn't.
It's not a healthy relationship because they have to, well, they feel they have to pick a side. So parental alienation, I think Cam's got the definition of parental alienation, the Kafka's definition. Have you got it?
It's called alienating behaviours.
And
so there's lots of factors that they look at when it comes to this. So they think about, why doesn't the child want to have a relationship with the other parent? So they'll go through a series of different types of factors that will identify whether a child has been alienated.
So professional ਜਦੋਂ assessment ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਗਾਰਡੀਅਨ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੋਇਆ ਉਹ ਕਰਦਾ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ। So measures ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, what the indicators?
So the indicators
ਕੀ ਆ?
So ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਆ ਜੇ ਬੱਚਾ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦਾ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਪੇ, ਮਾਂ ਚ ਪੇ ਵਾਲੇ,
ਗਾਲਾਂ ਕਰਦਾ,
ਜੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਆ ਜਸਟੀਫਾਇਬਲ ਆ, ਠੀਕ ਆ, ਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਆ ਥਿੰਕਿੰਗ, ਉਸ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੀ ਉਮਰ ਦੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਬੱਚੇ ਦਾ ਰੀਅਲ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਆ, ਜੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਗੱਲਾਂ
ਬੜੀਆਂ ਡੋਮੈਸਟਿਕ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਜੇ ਫਰਜ਼ ਕਰੋ ਜੇ ਬਾਪ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕੁੱਟਮਾਰ ਕਰਦਾ ਮਾਂ ਨੂੰ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਜੇ ਬੱਚਾ ਕਹੇ ਵੀ ਬਾਪ ਖਰਾਬ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਤਾਂ ਸਹੀ ਆ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਉਹਨੇ ਦੇਖਿਆ, ਫਿਰ ਤਾਂ ਸਹੀ
ਆ। ਜੇ ਮਾਂ ਪਿਓ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ ਚੀਜ਼ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ safeguarding the arena ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੈ ਜਾਂਦੀ, say they hit the child or they abuse their child in some way.
Well, there's some evidence behind this.
That can be very difficult for really young children. It's very difficult for them to distinguish that behaviour, isn't it?
I think there's a way.
But they can play against each other, parent ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ।
So ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਗੇ, ਜੇ ਬੱਚਾ ਕਹੇ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਦੇ ਮਾਂ ਪਿਓ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਪੇ ਠੀਕ ਨਹੀਂ, ਚਾਹੇ ਮੇਰੀ ਮਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਠੀਕ, ਉਹ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਧਮਕੀ ਦਿੰਦੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਧਮਕਾ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਆ, ਨਾਲੇ ਬੱਚਾ ਕਹਿ ਦੇਵੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਅਸਰ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਇਹਦਾ ਕਰਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਜਾਣਾ, ਇਹ ਅਨਜਸਟੀਫਾਈਬਲ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਆ ਕਰਕੇ ਹਰੇਕ ਮਾਂ ਪੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਧਮਕੀ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਚੀਜ਼ ਬਾਰੇ, ਹੈ ਨਾ।
ਬਲਦੀਪ, ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਲੀਗਲ ਸਾਈਡ ਵੀ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ, you know, what is the law? I've mentioned it a bit, but also this idea about evidence, because if that then the child's, and I know there's a very strict kind of proceedings around children's evidence in courts, especially very young children. Maybe very young children would display that behaviour by non-verbal rather than verbal. Just tell us a bit about how the law kind of operates in this space.
So, with regards to the family courts, dealing with where the child shall live, kinna contact karna, kinna de naal rehna hai. Je bachcha kehve
wishes and feelings,
absolutely, under the Children Act. So je bachcha kehve कि मैं dad nu nahi milna, the CAFCAS officer or the guardian will interview them and look at the indicators कि बच्चा क्यों नहीं मिलना चाहता दूसरे parent को.
reasons की है ना बच्चे.
So जे बच्चा कहे कि हाँ मैंने कुट्टिया मारिया सीगा या मैं देखिया सीगा कि वो मेरे दूसरे parent नु कोट्टा मारदा सी whatever, right? That is justifiable. That's a justified reason कि क्यों नहीं वो contact लेना चाहता दूसरे parent दे नाल. जे कोई reason नहीं है क्योंकि ਛੋਟੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ
ਜਿਆਦਾ ਯੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਨਾ
and often ਇਹ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਲ 2 ਸਾਲ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦੇ before contact can be set up between a dad for example because mum may have fled domestic abuse the child was very young so child ਨੇ actually ਆਪ experience ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ but ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਆ from what mum may be saying for example ਕਿ ਤੇਰਾ ਡੈਡੀ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ it may be intentional or unintentional by the mother
either way
and it may again verbal or non-verbal for example when dad's phone rings mum and mum you know the child picks that up
so sign
all of these things get picked up so CAFCAS and these experts have to look at whether or not the wishes and feelings are well reasoned so that's what they're looking out for and if they're not well reasoned you know there is no legitimate reason why this child is not having contact with the other parent or the child may disclose to CAFCAS, oh, well, mummy said.
And in terms of the law itself, you know, in parental rights, in law, each parent, as a starting point, has a right to access to the
No. No. The law is very clear. It's not about parents' rights, it's the child's rights.
That's
the child has a right and there is a presumption that the child spends time with both parents if it is safe to do
that's
so.
really important because ਮੈਂ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਲਚਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਔਲਾਦ ਆ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਰਟੀ ਆ ਇਹ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਪਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਆ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ ਮੋਸਟ ਮਾਡਰਨ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬੱਚਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਪਰਟੀ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੱਕ ਮਾਂ-ਬਾਪ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੱਕ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੇ ਆ that's the point isn't it
absolutely and that's why the focus is always the first section of the Children Act talks about the child's welfare is the paramount consideration of the court that is what the court has to consider
ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚਿਲਡਰਨ ਐਕਟ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੇਨ ਲੈਜਿਸਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਗਵਰਨ ਕਰਦਾ ਦੋ ਪ੍ਰਿੰਸੀਪਲਸ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ paramount consideration or what's the word that's used
it's a consideration
consideration ਹੈ ਵੀ ਹਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਾਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਸੁਣਨੀ ਬਾਪ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਸੁਣਨੀ ਹੈ ਕਰਕੇ at the end of the day you have to see where the child's going to live but ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣਨੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੀ that's the point isn't it
ਕੋਈ ਵੀ decision as court ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬਣਾਉਣੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ they want to work out what is in the best interest of the child
what if the child's been kind of you know taught to say certain things where they're being corrupted maybe how do you figure that one out?
Well, you figure that out because obviously what we try to do is look at the child's experience with that parent. So if, for example, if both parents were living together and the child can't remember any positive memories of the other parent, जो कोई खुशी दी गल नहीं समझ सकदा या बच्चा कोई memory नहीं recall कर सकदा say
there's something not right there then.
So then you begin to think, well, why is the child's story very different to their lived experience? So we try to explore what the child's real lived experience was and what their attachment was like with that parent. Because when a child is born, they'll become attached to both parents, especially if they're living together. So then we begin to look at what was the child's real lived experience. The child will also start saying, when they coach, they start to use adult language. So they'll begin to start saying things like, they know a lot more than what they should know about the marital relationship or the separation. They have a better understanding around the court process, which children don't normally have that kind of information. They have a better understanding around, ਮਾਂ ਪੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਮਾਂ ਪੇ ਨੂੰ ਪੈਸੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਉਹ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਉਹ ਇਹਦਾ ਕਰਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਸ ਪੇ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਜਾਂ ਮਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਕਰਕੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਮਾਂ ਪੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਸੋ ਉਹ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੇਟਰਡ ਮਾਂ ਪੇ ਕੋ ਆ ਉਹ ਬੱਚਾ ਵੀ begin to they begin to experience the same hatred, which they shouldn't be, and that's emotionally harming.
Because it rubs on them, है ना? Or behavior.
Well, not just rubs on them, it begins to influence them.
Influence हो ਜਾਂਦਾ.
So they begin to influence, and they begin to have this narrative that their parent is wrong. They have a good and bad parent. So they're put into this position of good and
just on
bad.
that one, do we have some variations in terms of gender? I'm thinking maybe that from, you know, if it's a boy, you know, whether they might have more kind of association with the father, maybe through, you know,
than the mother.
Not necessarily. No.
There's no
I have to say, in my experience, and I mean, I've worked with lots of these cases, and I mean, I do it day to day. This is like what I do every day. It doesn't matter. People have got this perception that it's mainly mothers that alienate children. Actually, in our families, it's both parents, and I see. With respect, and I think it depends as well, because we've got extended family. अपने बच्चे कल्ले माँ पे ना दे नाल नहीं रहंदे, दादा दादी ना जे extended family. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਨੂੰ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਅਸਰ ਪੈ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ,
ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਗ੍ਰੈਂਡਪੈਰੈਂਟਸ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਇਨ-ਲॉज ਵੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਓ, ਹਨਾ?
ਹਾਂ ਜੇ ਮਾਂ often moms ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮਾਂ normally she tends to leave the house, doesn't she? So the bachche, that's their home residence.
But ਇੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਆ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ the stereotypes within the community. I know there are stereotypes about the community from white professionals, but we talk within the community often ਇੱਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਅਣਬਣ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੀ ਮਾਂ ਕਮਲੀ ਆ, often the accusation, ਇਹ ਪਾਗਲ ਆ, ਇਹ ਕਮਲੀ ਆ, ਇਹ ਬੋਲਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਆ. And they use that as an argument to ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਚਾਓ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ.
I think it's an issue of honour. You touched on it earlier in your introduction ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਵਿਆਹ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ in a Punjabi or a Sikh family, family ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ. Everything from, you know, the saha, the chitti, and how the family are around that, all the way to the melnia, all the way to the various functions where extended family play a vital role. ਫਿਰ ਵਿਆਹ ਦੋ ਫੈਮਲੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ. So ਜਦੋਂ and ਬੜੇ ਧੂਮਧਾਮ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਨਾਈਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ. ਸੋ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਣਬਣ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ,
ਜਦੋਂ everything settles down, ਫਿਰ ਉਦੋਂ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ
when the relationship breaks down, ਜੋ ਅਣਬਣ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਇੱਜ਼ਤ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਲ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਮਾੜੇ ਬਣਨਾ ਆ. So then the usual situation is ਹਾਂ ਉਹ ਪਾਗਲ ਸੀਗੀ, ਉਹ ਕੋ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਸੀ,
ਮੇਰਾ ਸਿਰ ਦੁਖਦਾ,
ਫਲਾਣਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ ਘੁੰਮਦੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਇਧਰੋਂ. the female side it might be ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਖਾਂਦਾ ਪੀਂਦਾ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਕਰਦਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਕਰੀ ਰੱਖੀ ਸੀਗੀ, you know. So it's all about blame and leaving the families aside. ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਹਾਰਮਫੁਲ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਕਿਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ?
ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਅਸਰ
ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਇਹੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨੂੰ ਬਲੇਮ ਕਰੋ, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਆ, ਯੂ ਆਰ ਅਡਲਟਸ, ਰਾਈਟ? ਪਰ ਜੇ ਬੱਚਾ ਨਾ ਉੱਥੇ, ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਦੂਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਪਹੁੰਚਦੀ, ਬੱਚੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਦੀ ਆ. ਤੇ ਇਹ ਜ਼ੁਲਮ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਜ਼ੁਲਮ ਹੈ.
ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਬਲਦੀਪ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਇੱਕ ਪੈਰੈਂਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੰਡਰਮਾਈਨ ਕਰਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨੂੰ, ਇੱਕ ਪੈਰੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਇਹਦੀ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ, ਇਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਚੰਗਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਮਾੜਾ ਆ, ਦੂਜੇ ਬੱਚਾ ਇਹ ਸੁਣ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਮੈਂਟਲੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਮੋਸ਼ਨਲੀ ਤੇ ਵੈਲਬੀਇੰਗ, ਹੈ ਨਾ? ਉਹ ਬੱਚਾ ਇਨ ਬਿਟਵੀਨ ਕੋਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਕੰਫਲਿਕਟ
ਬਿਟਵੀਨ ਲਾਇਲਟੀਜ਼.
ਪਹਿਲਾ ਬੱਚਾ ਕੰਫਿਊਜ਼ਡ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਵੀ ਮੇਰਾ ਮਾਂ ਪੇ ਕਿਹੜਾ, ਮੇਰੀ ਮਾਂ ਰਾਈਟ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਮੇਰਾ ਪੇ ਰਾਈਟ ਆ. ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਕੰਫਿਊਜ਼ਨ ਆ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ, ਹਨਾ, ਉਹ ਬੱਚਾ ਆਪਦੀ ਅੰਦਰਲੀ
ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੱਸ ਸਕਦਾ,
ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਬਲੇਮ ਕਰੇ.
Well, they blame themselves because the parents are arguing about the child. So what they think is that my mum and dad are arguing because of me, not because they are having their own difficulties. So that child gets dragged into those disagreements, and the child is powerless in those situations. And the power, and also the child can't fully express their wishes and feelings. If we're asking a child, who do you love the most? Where would you like to live?
They're frightened to say, I suppose.
Well, of course, because who do they choose between their mum and dad?
They can't.
They love the mum and dad. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And I think we've been talking about alienating behaviours. I think Cam touched on it briefly earlier that actually dunne passe hunde you know udron pe ta dadi lage hunde ki teri maa idda di si teri maa at contact sessions even you know I've seen recordings
this is an extra dimension is it within our South Asian families. You're not dealing with a mother and a father, you're dealing with a whole kind of a extended family on each side.
ਫਿਰ ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਬ੍ਰੇਨ ਵਾਸ਼ ਕਰ ਤੇਰੀ ਮਾਂ ਇਦਾਂ ਫਲਾਨਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਕਰਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਕਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਗ੍ਰੈਂਡ ਪੈਰੈਂਟ ਨੇ ਕਹਿਣਾ it's not very pleasant is
it? Well, it's an awful situation for the child because can you imagine you've got two parents really bad mouthing each other. If you've got a child growing up thinking both of my parents are really terrible parents, where does that child go?
So what can happen? I mean, mental. Presumably, the child can then self-harming behaviour, mental health.
In the cases that I've worked with, children are very, very depressed in these situations. We've got children.
School performance will be
withdrawn. They're aggressive. They're fearful. They're anxious.
It affects their education as well.
They're overly anxious. Well, they're overly anxious than what they normally are. So it really, really impacts them. So we wonder why our children have mental health difficulties when we have family breakdown. I mean, 50% of our children live in separated households.
And the other thing as well, I was going to say, children, Baldeep, they have a problem like having a good relationship with friends, making friends. They find it very difficult to have that trust relationship.
Not only friends, on GSC, you know, ਗਾ relationships ਵੀ ਕੰਸੀਡਰ ਕਰੀਏ ਹੁਣ ਜੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਆਪਦੇ ਮਾਪੇ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਣ ਕੇ ਲੜਦੇ ਝਗੜਦੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਬੋਲਬਾਣੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਗਾਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇਹੀ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਰਿਡ ਲਾਈਫ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਉਹੀ ਬਿਹੇਵੀਅਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕੰਟੀਨਿਊ ਕਰਨਾ ਫਿਰ ਉਹੀ ਸਾਈਕਲ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਤੇ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਹੋਣਾ ਹੈ
Come, you know, we can be focusing on maybe the context of one child. Often there's more than one child and there's siblings as well. Could it be that one sibling almost is going oriented towards one parent? How did you manage that one?
Yeah, so you can get splitting. It's what we call splitting in therapy. So what happens is everyone becomes split. So everyone becomes either if you're loyal to dad, that means you can't love mom. If you're loyal to mom, that means you can't love dad. So we get lots of siblings which are split as well, which makes it really, really difficult for siblings to have relationships because then they become.
But siblings can undermine the sibling as well.
Well, they get drawn into the conflict.
If you've got an older sibling who's saying that they don't want a relationship with the other parent, it's very likely
they can play against each other.
Well, the younger siblings will just follow what the older siblings do because they think, well, they should know.
I think there's a call coming in.
Have we got a call? All right, yeah, thanks. ਹਾਂਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਪੈਰੈਂਟਲ ਏਲੀਏਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਜਾਂ ਦੂਜੇ ਤੇ ਕੋਈ ਬੇਗਾਨਗੀ ਕਰ ਦੇਣੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੰਨ ਭਰ ਦੇਣੇ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਰੀਅਲ ਲਾਈਫ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਆ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਮਨਜੀਤ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਰ just from our lived experience ਮੈਂ I can say I've seen I think there in a lot of families and we've got a call now ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ from somebody who's been experienced this in some way ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਅੱਜ confidentiality we're not going to answer so ਆਓ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਾਲਰ ਵੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ ਹੈਲੋ ਜੀ
Hello everyone. Good evening to everyone.
Thanks for calling. We don't need any details from you. And if you want to speak in English or Punjabi, it's up to you.
How you feel comfortable.
Yeah. So I mean,
I'm comfortable in English if you don't mind.
That's
perfect.
Fine. So I mean, maybe you can just tell us a bit about your own experience in this space, and what thoughts you would like to share with us. Yeah.
Okay. Number one, thank you to all of you for highlighting this issue, bringing it to people's attention. It is not talked about. It is, a thing to be ashamed of, and it shouldn't be because many people are going through it. I was married for 20 plus years. I have 4 children, and I was in a position where I was alienated from them. And I did not have them in my life for 4.5 years.
That must have been really difficult.
Very difficult, yeah.
It's the closest thing to a bereavement.
Exactly, yeah.
how I would describe it.
How did you cope then? How did you cope with that? Did you have support? Did you manage to get people?
I had support. I would say number one, Vaiguru.
Okay.
Okay. I had support from a wonderful barrister, Sikh female barrister based in England. She was amazing because you didn't have to explain the culture. That barrier was not there. So that I found amazing. CAM's support was amazing. I never knew this type of system was in place. A parenting apart where an individual, qualified individual, can speak to both adults and children to find out the best way.
Yeah, but you said that you were alienated from your children for 4 years, yeah?
4.5 years.
Yeah. So I mean, was that because there was a judgment that somehow the children would be better off? Well, clearly that was a judgment. What was that based on? Or in your understanding, was it that the children themselves had been kind of as we were saying on the Kandaparesage, or they've been
did they make that choice
set against you, or I mean,
I was basically kicked out of the house.
Okay.
And yes, you are right. And even though a court order had been put in place, they did not stick to it. And in fact, my mother passed away, and none of my children were allowed to be there.
So what you're saying is that, in a sense, they had quite a lot of support networks, whereas you were quite isolated.
Yeah.
Is that would that be right? I mean, you were
Very lonely time. Very lonely time.
Yeah.
I had my friends, my female friends. I had some of my family, my brother, my bubby, and Vaiguru.
But did you also find, I mean, you don't have to answer this one, because we were talking about is it and how often, all the kind of burden is dumped on the woman, and then she is often one to blame for family breakdown. Do you think that it's almost like a taboo around your own network, thinking, I don't really want to get involved with this one?
100%. I mean, I didn't get any financial. I didn't get anything from the house. I haven't got my jewellery back, nothing like that. And basically, it was like, I feel like I was in an incubator to have children, and then as soon as that job was done, I was discarded.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's obviously a very long story. So, tell us about the resolution, because you were reunited with your children. Just tell us about that. How did it all kind of then, in a sense, the situation, improve?
My eldest came back into my life.
Okay.
And then after that, my son came back into my life, and then he disclosed the emotional abuse that they were actually suffering.
Okay, so your children made their own independent decision then to recontact with you, yeah? So were they would have been older then at that point, yeah? They would have been...
the younger two are still young, but the elder two definitely made their own decision. Even my younger ones have made their decision. Okay. One's a little bit on the fence, but I do have a wonderful relationship with all four of them.
Okay. And what about your relationship with your the family, your husband's side? Is there some kind of communication there, or is it all very... Okay, so the children come and spend time with you and then spend time with them, is that how it is?
Well, my elder two, they're old enough to make their own mind, and because of their beliefs and what they've seen, they have got no contact with their father, and they realised basically
what was going on,
what was right and what was wrong.
Just one last question before we kind of wrap this one up. What advice would, based on your own experience, if there are others maybe going through this same experience, what one or two pieces of advice would you give them?
Number one, you will get through this. It is hard. It will take time, but you will get through this. The other thing is that there are so, like, you know, with parenting apart, with what Cam does, there are, within our culture, the resources are there.
So seek out professional help. Seek out.
Please.
Look, Wendy, thanks very much for ringing. And it's a very difficult call, but then again, thanks for sharing.
It's very hard,
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Waheguru ji ka khalsa.
I
You don't have to pick up on anything of that.
I want to just touch on one point. It's sad that the situation is where this lady has to wait till the children of an age to make decisions.
I know.
The court's in a very difficult position. It's usually a he said, she said situation. You know, one parent makes allegations of something against the other, and the other may make some counter allegations. So we have what we call a fact-find hearing, okay? So the judge hears the evidence from both parties about the allegation, whether it was, you know, a slap, a punch, or emotional abuse, or coercive controlling behaviour, whatever the allegation might be. The court then makes a decision. And the court makes a decision based on the evidence that it hears. Whose evidence did they prefer? Were they more persuaded by one party over the other?
Right.
And parental alienation or alienating behaviours is now cropping up on the schedule of allegations. Before, it used to be just the more physical abuse, the financial control. Over the last few years, the coercive control, you know, controlling. I'll use a stereotypical version, so apologies, but controlling ke maa kithe jandi a, kado jandi a, kinne paise kharch sakdi a, gaddi nu access hega ki nahi, that kind of control.
But even maybe using the children to be their candidates and actually saying ki kardi si.
Finding out from them. Exactly.
And
that happens
Yeah.
post separation, significantly dragging the children in. Ke mum kithe gayi si, kinna galla kardi a. It's terrible. To drag them into that. But what I just want to say is that the court then has to make a finding whether you know, it happened or not, including alienating behaviours. Is one parent doing that? So the court now is making very clear, if there is a parent that is alienating a child and cannot promote a healthy relationship between the other parent and the child, the courts are now considering removing that child from that parent. So J, for example, जिन्ना बच्चा रहिंदा है तो ओह कहंदे कि असीं दूसरे पार्टी नूं मिलना नहीं, right? And there's no reason for that, right? कि उन्होंने कान इन्ने भर दित्ते ਉਹ contact नहीं लेना चाਹੁੰਦੇ दूसरे parent ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, right? कोर्ट कहंदी है जे ਅਸੀਂ evidence on के and it's proven कि ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੰਨ ਭਰੇ ਆ, so much so ਕਿ ਉਹ ਦੂਸਰੇ parent ਤੋਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਡਰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ contact ਨੂੰ. The court is saying ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੱਚਾ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ and we will place with the other parent ਪੱਕਾ.
That's
so
really
removing
good.
from that situation. And worst case scenario, je inna bacche de mind te asar pੈ ਰਿਹਾ ਆ by the parent, right?
There could be other reasons as well.
There could be, but if there is no other good reason and they're being alienated,
that's a different thing.
The emotional harm can be such that the local authority get involved and remove the child and put them in foster care.
What about, I mean, in a sense, not all separation or divorce might involve alienation. It may be two very lovely, loving parents. But what if in that situation the child says, I want to stay with mum?
No, I mean, the court's always going to take the view that the child should have a relationship.
But there could be a situation where alienation isn't a factor. But you could still have this the child expressing a.
But we also need to help the child to. We also need to work with the child to understand
why they might be
what is their reasonable and rational decision not to do that, and.
Well, I spend all my time with my dad. He takes me out to the football, to the sports.
He spends more time with me.
My mum's from Punjab.
Doesn't do anything.
You know, she's nice. She makes food, but I don't really get on with her.
But that's not a reason for not to have a relationship.
She just drags me to the Gurdwara and I get bored stiff.
That's okay. That's what most parents do.
Harm, actually,
That's not emotional harm.
So
that's
it's not just. So we're not bowing down to a child's personal likes and dislikes.
So wishes
it's
and feelings.
Deeper, isn't it?
No.
So under the welfare considerations under the Children Act, the welfare checklist, wishes and feelings is one consideration. Okay, And even those are given certain weight depending on the child's competency and understanding. So a very young child saying, I do all the fun stuff, ke dad de naal ghum phirde hain.
Toys and things,
Yeah, exactly. You know, that will be given slightly less weight than a very competent child who rationalizes or gives proper reasons why.
But also, I think we've got to put it into context with what Baldip's just said. Obviously, as a child grows older, they want to have a bit more independence. They will be doing different things. So if that parent is not being flexible enough, and if that parent may not be parenting that child age appropriately, then also those factors come into consideration as well. But there's still support out there for parents. Say, for example, the child saying, oh, I don't want to go to mom's because she's always on her phone and she doesn't do anything with me.
Like they can be neglected by one parent as well.
So we then help that mother to think, you know, your child is saying this about you. So what can we do to make that better? What kind of relationship is your child expecting to make them feel more connected?
Yeah, right.
What about in terms of, we touched on the question of izzat earlier on, and sadly we still, you know, it's a much abused or misunderstood concept, yeah? How does that play out? Because as we were saying, you know, sometimes these families like two mafia families. It's not, you know, it's a whole kind of. I remember when I used to do child abuse investigations, or where it said that a young girl, maybe 13, 14, 15 years, run away from home. 15, 16. I'd go around and there'd be like 50 people in the house, all waiting for me to deliver their daughter. I mean, how do you manage those situations?
That's frightening, you know. That's frightening.
Well, no, I think I've
you
worked
know, the whole kind of clan's involved.
But the thing is,
you have to assess the whole clan.
No, we don't.
You do it individually.
I think what you have to do is we have to assess the parents. They're the primary carers of the child. The extended family is a secondary resource.
But ਸਾਡਾ ਬੜਾ ਤਾਇਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਚਾਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦਾਦੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੜਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਹੈ ਪਿੰਡ ਵੀ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ
What often
ਮਾਂ
happens
ਕੋਲ ਦੇ ਦੇਣਾ
in those situations, I mean, I say it regularly in court, ਕਿ court ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਰਾ ਲਾਣਾ ਬੜਾ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ and that's not helpful. It's not helpful.
ਮਾਂ ਬਾਪ ਦੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਤਾਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ
So we touched on it earlier that ਵਿਆਹ in our community are between two families. Separation ਵੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਣ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ between two families. But please don't bring it to court.
No.
So if there is a court case ongoing, you know, if someone wants support, that's fine. Bring one individual. But ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਰਾ ਟੱਬਰ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, it causes so much friction, and we have to get security on the floor.
God, it's embarrassing,
because ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਕੁਛ ਕਹਿ ਦੇਣਾ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵੱਲ ਡੇਲੇ ਕਰ ਦੇਣੇ or whatever, upset them, and it's a fuse.
Provoke them,
Yeah.
But also it's important the court does recognise that the child does have grandparents and the court does promote those relationships and we also promote those relationships as a social worker because we don't just think of the child in isolation of just the parents but we think about their wider network and support,
especially in
like you're talking about the grandparents. I mean, what sort of theme do you have around them to what sort of relationship should the grandparents should have with their grandchild?
They should have a grandparent relationship. They should not have the parental responsibility or the primary carer responsibility.
So they can't dictate, they can't sort of
happen. I mean,
ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮਾਪੇ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਤੇ ਮੰਮੀ ਬੜੀ ਅਕਲ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਡੈਡੀ that's what they usually say. Oh ਮੈਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਕੇ ਇਦਾਂ ਕਰਿਆ ਕਰ ਜਾ ਹਨਾ
ਛੋਟਾ ਬੱਚਾ mother's had the child but she's out to work because she's earning money and the grandmother raises the child.
That could be the other way around.
And you know,
it's the upbringing is wrong the way you bring the child up. I wouldn't bring the child up like that. As a conflict.
But at the end of the day, the grandmother's not going to be in the child's life forever. So what we also have to take into account, and also the grandmother doesn't have parental responsibility.
It's still the mother.
So the mother still has the primary responsibility for the child. Now, if for some reason the mother can't care for the child, we have to still consider that factor. What are the things that she can do and what are the things that she can't do?
So would you look at things like attachment there? Because I know
attachment, parenting ability, capacity. We look at whether the parent can care for that child. And that's the most important thing. How much can that parent care for that child? So when I'm working with parents, a lot of parents will say, oh, I want this much time with the child. That's okay, but can you physically care for that child? Can you physically take that child to school? Can you take the full responsibility that you're saying that you want when it comes to looking after that child?
Our attitudes changed because, there was a time where basically, it was expected the mother would look after the children, raise the children. There were machines to make children, and that the father would go out and earn the bread, But now it's changing a lot, isn't it?
Well, I would say that
the attitude's changing. So if there's say the mother's absent because she's at work or she's gone overseas, there's a lot of stigma saying you abandon your child. Whereas if the father's got, he has to go. That's part of his job. Is that changing now? Or
I think yes, it is changing.
It is.
That's the bottom line. It's changing by virtue of shared care arrangements. Shared care wasn't a thing previously. It was that the child had residence with one parent, and contact for a couple of hours or a weekend with the other parent. The courts are recognising the roles and responsibilities everyone has. Mother and father both working, other responsibilities they may have. So they are moving towards, and also responsibilities. I'll say modern families, if I say that. Modern families
like our family.
Yeah, certainly.
I say modern, we listen to each other. I listen to Manjeet a lot, don't I?
I listen to you a lot as well.
You're not alienating your kids then. Who do you love the most?
But duties, ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਾਂਝੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ ਹੈ ਨਾ in a married life. So ਹੁਣ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਊਗਾ ਕਿ husband will go to foundries, factories and work and stuff, and the wife would stay at home and look after the kids. ਹੁਣ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ ਦੋਨੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹਨੇ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚੱਲ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਰਾਤ ਤੂੰ ਸਾਂਭ ਜਾਣੇ, ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਰਾਤ ਮੈਂ ਸਾਂਭਦੀ।
ਬਲਦੀਪ ਇਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੋਹਣੀਆਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਸਹੀ ਹੈ ਇਹ, ਪਰ ਇਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਨਾ ਮਰਦ ਦੇਖਭਾਲ ਕਰਦਾ ਉਹ ਥੋੜਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇੰਨਾ ਗਿਆਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਪਾਲਣਾ ਪਰੋਸਣਾ, ਇਹ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਪੈ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ that's very crucial, I think.
Well, I think that's a stereotype that is changing.
No, I think because it's not.
No, I'm going to disagree with you there, Manjeet, because a lot of I would say a lot of the fathers that I work with, they really know how to look. They've been there for the child. They've been there at the birth. They've been going to all the antenatal class. They're reading lots of books. They're going to parenting classes.
I thought we have to throw the flip side as well.
But are you describing liberal lefty fathers?
No.
Or
I have to
normal fathers?
No. I would say, and I think we need to shift away from this perspective. Because I do feel that a lot
there is a shift, there's a massive shift. Amongst Punjabis, what do you say?
Yeah. I would say amongst Punjabis. I mean, if I look at my own family, and if I look at my own brothers, they are very, very active within their children's lives, down to the point of changing nappies and taking them out, doing things, and even doing housework.
We did that. I mean, we're not young.
We're not here to change nappies.
We did what you want. Work together as a team.
We're heading towards the end of the show, but we can extend it if we could. I don't look on the legal side because clearly that's the space that you're working in. How effective do you think UK legal institutions such as family courts are in understanding the unique cultural dynamics? I mean, do you have to be a Sikh barrister to be able to work that? What if it's a Gora barrister? Are there now more sensitivity within the courts?
There is more sensitivity. We represent a diverse community.
That's good.
Just because I'm Indian or Punjabi or Sikh doesn't mean my clients would only be Punjabi or Sikh. I represent people from a vast variety of backgrounds. Equally, there are many that represent the Punjabi community from diverse backgrounds themselves. So yes, that's there. The court.
So if there are,
because there is a myth about that.
Well, if there are families involved, because then they might say, I'm going to get a barrister now, I'm going to get a lawyer. Would they be advised to not just look at the ethnicity, but to look maybe other factors, or do you think ethnicity is really critical there to get sympathy?
To see the culture.
Because you set up the Sikh court, didn't you? Maybe these were one of the arguments that you used, that they can have more, empathy and more understanding
and you can understand
of the cultural dynamics.
The culture better.
The reason we set up the Sikh court was so we could skip the explanation or the need for an expert to explain cultural dynamics or religious arguments or religious upbringing of a child, for example, the importance of a jura or case or karban, whatever it might be. So what the whole process of the Sikh court was to basically step over that issue, because we would all innately have that understanding as Sikhs ourselves from, you know, diverse backgrounds in terms of the level of practice of Sikhi as well, and understanding of it. But I think the courts, the English courts certainly must have consideration to culture and background, because the law says it should.
The situation,
Under the welfare checklist, the child's background and circumstances must be considered.
Including religion?
Yeah.
Including religion.
Culture and religion.
Yeah.
Language as well.
Language is a big barrier as well.
Well, Dave, so, I mean, again, it's a tricky one, but in a sense, what about this suggestion that, because I mean, I used to, when I was working in social work, I used to have to contend with this feeling that maybe I might be more sympathetic to the male patriarchy, and so often the females would say, we want a female social worker. I mean, we need to be sensitive to those kind of fears that people might have as well.
It's interesting. I think Sare different on this.
For
For example, yes, there may be a female that doesn't want to speak about the sexual abuse aspect of a case.
That's very sensitive as well.
But equally, I remember a case where I was specifically asked for by a female Muslim client who said, you know, I know that from where she was, from her background, she says, warriors on there, they're protecting brothers. And that was her thought process in instructing me. You know, and there are people that say we only want to instruct female barristers for sexual abuse style cases, but equally they may want a male to represent them.
And I would say that sometimes I get the same as well. So sometimes I'm asked to do some work with parents just because of their cultural background, and because
you can understand them better,
and also understand where they're coming from when it comes to their religion, when it comes to their culture, especially when that has complicated making decisions about the child's.
Because a lot of families, like they're involved, the extended families, and maybe the others can't understand that.
I agree. I think where possible, there is an added benefit of instructing someone that understands your background and your culture because of their background and culture. For example, Cam's instructed on many cases, I know, because of the lack of cultural understanding by a particular social worker from a non-diverse area of England, for example, where they may say feeding a child with your hands, you know, is force feeding. Whereas in our culture, that's absolutely normal. You know, it might be that taking a child to Renspies, they sit there all evening and they force the kids to
they're forcing them, or they're brainwashing them.
They force the kids to stay awake all night doing keep.
Well, let's just explore that one.
And I have to say, I'm going to use that because I actually worked with a family, and one of the arguments that were made for that child was that dad was Amritdhari,
right?
And mum wasn't. She hadn't done the Amrit at the time, and she didn't like. Dad was more active in the Sikh culture, whereas mum wasn't, and she didn't want dad to take the child to these events. And I had to explain to her that when the child is with dad, actually that's dad's right, what responsibility.
He has a right as well.
He can do that because that's part of the child's
unless there's a safeguarding concern.
But there's no safeguarding in it. What's the safeguarding in taking the child to the Gurdwara?
Well, what if? Well,
no, there is. You have to be careful.
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
But still, you need that.
Let's take the call, and then last time I played devil's advocate, I got thrown off the channel. But let's take a call, and then we'll come back to this one. Hanji,
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਮੈਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਆਨ ਕੀਤਾ
ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਮੈਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਇਹੀ ਦੇਖਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਲਈ ਪੇਰੈਂਟਸ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੀ ਹੈਗਾ
ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਕੁਝ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫੈਕਟਸ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਕਾਫੀ ਲੋਕ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਠੀਕ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਤੱਕ ਮੁਗਲਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸੀ हुकूमत नाल सी जेड़ा झगड़ा सी अज कुछ किसी कह दिए इस वक्त मैनू वो नहीं आ रहे जी बाकी मानस की जात सब एक ही पहचान लो गोबिंद सिंह महाराज ने किया
हां जी
ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕੋਈ ਬੋਲੇ ਰਾਮ ਰਾਮ, ਕੋਈ ਖੁਦਾਏ, ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਅਨੁੱਠੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਸਿੱਖ ਰਿਲੀਜਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਤੱਕ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕਿਧਰੇ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਲਈ ਉੱਪਰ ਥੱਲੇ ਗਿਆ। ਔਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਤੇ ਬੜੀ ਛੋਟੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹਾਂ
ਜੀ ਜੀ,
ਮੁਗਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੁਕੂਮਤਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਲੜਾਈ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ, ਝਗੜਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਜ਼ਬਰਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ
ਜੀ ਜੀ,
ਉਹ ਜ਼ੁਲਮ ਹੈ।
ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਾਂ
ਹਮੇਂ ਫੈਕਟ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਰਾਈਟ ਰੱਖਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਮੁਸਲਮਾਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਨਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਆਮ ਉਹ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਥੀ ਸਨ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਭਾਈ ਮਰਦਾਨਾ ਜੀ ਹੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਮੀਰ ਜੀ ਹੋਏ,
ਆਂਟੀ ਜੀ
ਸਾਡੀ ਹੋਈ,
ਸਾਡੀ ਟੌਪਿਕ
ਕੋਈ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਕਿਸੇ ਵਿੱਚ।
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਭੈਣ ਜੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ। ਹਾਂਜੀ ਸੋ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਆ ਉਹ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਕਿਹਾ,
ਬਹੁਤ ਸੋਹਣਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਹਾ।
ਆਪਾਂ ਕਦੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਣਬਣ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਨਾ
ਤੀਵੀਂ ਆਦਮੀ ਦੀ,
ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਖਿੱਚਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਕਦੇ ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਖਿੱਚਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ,
ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੀ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ।
ਹਾਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਠੀਕ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਮੈਂ ਇਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੀ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੈਕਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੜੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਪੀਚ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਕੋਈ ਕੁਝ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਰਾਈਟ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ। ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਸਹੀ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਮਝਾਇਆ ਜਾਏ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਮਝਾਇਆ ਜਾਏ ਔਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੈਕਟਸ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਰਾਈਟ ਰੱਖੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਗਲੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਵੇਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹ ਫੈਕਟਸ ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਔਰ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਰਾਈਟ, ਇਹ ਫੈਕਟ ਹੈ।
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਜੀ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ very some really great points. I'm going to come back to this issue now. It's kind of connected there, because we do have sometimes one parent wants somebody to follow religious
and the other one doesn't,
because the child's got it right. But what if the parent feels that, I mean, the example, they're going to an all-night Renswijk and this child's getting tired and actually the child doesn't like it, or teaching them God, the child's right, and maybe there's
like forcing them to do certain things.
So how do you balance this out, Baldeep? I mean, because
so usually
culture is not paramount, is it?
It's a consideration.
It's a
so
consideration,
in those situations, for example, one parent कहता कि दूसरी पार्टी रेंट्स पे लेके जाते हैं बच्चों को, and the बच्चे don't like it. जब बच्चे like नहीं करते, then the parent, if there's no agreement between them, will take the matter to court, or it'll be a consideration at court under a specific issue order, or a prohibitive steps order to prevent the father taking the child for an all-night respite. It might be a consideration of the court that ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੇ age, wishes and feelings ਕਿ ਅੱਗੇ ਕੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ। So often ਇਹ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਇਕੱਠੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਰਹਿਣ ਸਵਾਈਆਂ ਨੂੰ, ਐਂਡ ਜਦੋਂ ਹੁਣ ਅਣਬਣ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਆ ਹਸਬੈਂਡ ਵਾਈਫ ਚ, ਹੁਣ ਉਹ ਉਂਗਲਾਂ ਖਾ ਕੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ oh it's a cult or it's something bad, and so if the children have already experienced all of that anyway, then it's fine. If the children have got to a stage where they say and they're competent ਕਿ ਬੱਚੇ ਆਪ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ, the court will consider. And also remember, actually, it's a really interesting case in the Supreme Court where Lady Hale said parental control when a child is born is physical. And as the child grows, that parental control is little more than stern advice. Okay? So when the child is small, for example, as the child grows older, can walk, can explain, can express, they may have a different view. So we'd have to go behind what their view is, why it's there. It might be another alienating behaviour.
I mean, what I would say is, because I don't want any ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਤੋਂ ਦੂਰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ, ਪਰ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਵੱਲ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਲਿਆਉਣਾ, ਲਿਆਓ, ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਲਿਆਂਦੇ ਆ, ਪਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਪ੍ਰੇਰਨਾ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਰਸ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ।
ਜੇ ਧੱਕਾਸ਼ਾਹੀ ਕਰੋ ਫਿਰ ਬੱਚਾ ਵੀ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਹਟ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਨਾ।
child rebels to that.
I think you've got to give context to a child as well. Why we're doing it, why is it important?
You have to give them reasons behind it.
And explain to them. But if you don't explain to your child why we're doing it,
ਬੱਚਾ ਵੀ question ਪੁੱਛੇ why, ਹੈ ਨਾ, and you have to give them the answers.
ਤਾਂ ਫੇਰ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੜਬੜ ਹੋਈ ਤਾਂ ਫੇਰ ਜੇ ਦੂਜਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੈਰੈਂਟ ਆ ਉਹ ਕਹੇ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੇ ਵਾਲ ਕੱਟਣੇ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਬੱਚਾ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਵਾਲ ਕੱਟਣੇ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਸਾਡਾ ਵੀ ਕਸੂਰ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ, ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਫ਼ਰਤ ਪਾਤੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਲਈ। ਸੋ ਇਟਸ ਰੀਲੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ that ਸਿੱਖੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ। ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਬਣਾ ਦਈਏ, ਸਿੱਖ ਬਣਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਸਿੱਖ ਬਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ।
ਬੱਚਾ ਕਵੇ ਫੇਰ।
So it's really important. Look, we are coming to the end, but I just wanted to explore maybe something. I mean, we've touched on the Sikh cult, but What about local mediators? ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਜ਼ਮਾਨੇ 'ਚ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਪੰਚਾਇਤਾਂ ਇਕੱਠੀਆਂ ਕਰ ਲੈਣੀਆਂ ਸਿਆਣੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਕਰ ਲਓ
ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਹੀ ਆ
ਕੁੱਟਮਾਰ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਚਲੋ ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਪਸਲਾ ਸਲਾਈ ਕਰ ਲੈਣੇ ਆ
ਇਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ
does that still function or I mean is the role for that these kind of feudal kind of
I think it's a little dangerous.
It's dangerous.
I think it's dangerous to allow someone that doesn't deal with these things daily to give advice. One of the issues in our community that we hear time and time again is chalo koi na mitti pao agge taro
what about
ਕੋਈ ਨਾ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਹੋਇਆ ਚਲੋ ਜੀ ਪੰਜ ਸਿੰਘ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਕਰ ਲੋ ਪਾਠ ਕਰ ਲੋ
ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰ ਲੋ ਠੀਕ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਹੈ ਨਾ
I mean ਉਹਨਾਂ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਚਲੋ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਕਰੋ ਚੌਪੇ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਪਾਠ ਕਰ ਲੋ I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't stop people doing that. We see evidence.
I think that should run parallel. I don't think we should turn our face from that because that is our background, that is what we're taught. But then we can have professional support as well.
Exactly.
It's a bit of meeri peeri, isn't it?
ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ important ਕਰੋ ਪਾਠ ਔਰ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਭੈਣ ਨੇ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਫੋਨ ਕੀਤਾ
ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਲਾਜ਼ਮੀ ਹੈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਾਠ ਕਰਨਾ ਨਾ
ਉਹ ਭੈਣ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਨੂੰ ਗੁਰੂ ਵੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਹਾਈ ਸਕਦਾ
ਪਰ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਗਲਤ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ
ਆਪਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਤੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਸਿੱਟਣਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਲੈਣੀ ਹੈ
ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਸੀ ਗਲਤ ਕੁਝ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਹੱਥ ਚੱਕ ਰਹੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ
I think religion can play an important role for us as social workers. We often ask parents who if they've got no one, sometimes religion is the only counselor
that's where
they
you
get.
go
Sometimes that prayer and going to the Gurdwara offers that sort of
it's like therapy ਉਹ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ
and also meeting with community
ਸ਼ਾਂਤੀ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਸੁਖਨੀ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਪਾਠ ਸੁਣ ਕੇ
it's to preserve your own mental health to be able to go through the system.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
What about just kind of final round really, just around healing and prevention. I mean, the prevention is better than cure. Sadly, I mean, you might have the data. The divorce rates, kind of family breakdown.
Going up? Yeah,
is going up significantly within Punjabi communities. Lots of different factors, so we can't.
Many reasons.
But what about that? Prevention better than cure?
I think certainly if it is safe to do so, that you should try mediation.
Exactly.
Because sometimes
that's what comes. ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਨਾ ਇਦਾਂ
to get to the bottom of an issue because sometimes there's misunderstanding, sometimes there's communication breakdown, sometimes there's too many cooks, for example. To isolate the issues, brainstorm them and then work out how to overcome them. So I think professional intervention in terms of mediation between relationships is important. But what I would say is that inevitably some relationships break down, but they break down between the parents. What we've got to step away from and change as a community is not turn hostile in terms of families. If the grandparents can try and stay an arm's distance, chal theek hai husband wife te nahi bante, grandparents thoda ja dur eh gallan de vich zyada interfere na karan, then there is scope for example
ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ
well it's to facilitate contact. ਜਦੋਂ ਦਾਦੀ ਕਹਿਣ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ and then mum absolutely hates ਦਾਦੀ for example, then we cannot put forward Daddi as someone that can support or supervise contact. So try and stay a little arm's distance. Let them work it out.
I mean, we had the phone call, it was after 4 years that she was reunited with her children. In that case, it seems like the elder children made their own autonomous
made their own sort of
choice, so because a child who's maybe 12, 13 might have a different view. When they get 16, 17, 18, 19, they might be very curious. So how do we heal?
Well, I think
because there's a lot of gap in between.
No, but that's why we say when we're doing this type of work where this type of resistance is presented by the child, we have to work with the parents first. Because we have to get them on the same page. Get them to think about their child, the emotional impact it's having, the mental.
Because you have to leave your differences as a couple.
Well, they can have their differences. But those differences shouldn't be their child's differences.
That's right.
So what we're saying is that their child should have a balanced relationship with both parents, and both parents should know how to promote that relationship. And that's what we work on, helping them to promote each other, reassuring that child. helping that child through that difficult journey of moving from one home to the other. How do we do that? And that's going back to the basics.
It's actually really interesting. One of the things I do in a courtroom, जो cross examination करीदा कचहरी दे विच, I say to a parent कि तुसी कुछ चंगा बोलो इहदे बारे, about my client for example, कुछ चंगा बोल के, and you'll often see कि एक चंगा लफ्ज़ भी नहीं बोल सकते whoever the other parent.
That's really interesting because actually that's against Sikhi. You know, Sikhi ਭੁੱਲਣ ਹਾਰ ਸਭ ਕੋ ਭੁੱਲ ਗੁਰੂ ਕਰਤਾਰ ਸਾਡਾ
ਬਖਸ਼ਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਨੂੰ
ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਧਰਮ ਹੀ ਇਸ ਤੇ ਬੇਸਿਸ ਆ ਵੀ ਗੁਰੂ ਕੋਲ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਗਲਤੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਮੰਨ ਲਓ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੂਜੀ ਦੀ ਗਲਤੀ ਵੀ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ we're not saying that ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁੱਟ ਮਾਰ ਕੋਈ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਬੁਲਾ ਲਓ
One of the key things that we do when we're working with children is we help them to recreate a new narrative for their family. Because the child's already confused. The child's already got a bad parent and a good parent.
You don't want to confuse them more then.
Yeah, so what we do is we help them to recreate what is a new story that you would like to have with your family. What is a story that you would like to tell others? What would your child like to share with others, which is positive for them?
And they can also associate with the good. Look, nobody's perfect. There will be some good bits. So, you know, I mean...
But you can only do that through apology and repair.
Exactly.
And if you can't apologise or we can't take responsibility and we stay in the blame game...
How do you work like as a therapist, like with a child? Do they write something, draw something? How do you work with them?
Well, I work with the parents.
Yeah, with the parents.
And then what we do is we work with the child together. We bring the child into that work.
Depend on the age as well.
No, from a very small age. So I worked with a child who was 3. Mum was really struggling.
So we use pictures and things like that? Would you use genogram?
No, we got the parents to do that work. So we used to go to we used to go to the ballpark and play with the child together, all 3 of us, all 4 of us.
And you see,
so that the child could build a relationship with the dad. And we used to go into play-like areas, so it was all therapeutically done in that way. So taking them to do things which were together as a family,
like connecting them together.
So, I think we've probably run out of time now. So I don't know if there's any final thoughts
message
or messages you want to give to the community out there.
Yeah, well, children need both parents, regardless of what we say. So if parents have ended their relationship, doesn't mean that the child's relationship has ended with those parents.
Absolutely echo that. You know, relationships break down, but you know, because of the long-term short-term and long-term impact, you know, and we want to repair our community. We want to repair the threads that hold our community together and not undo it.
ਕਰਕੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਅਸਰ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਬਚਪਨ ਤੋਂ ਜੋ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਨਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਫਲੈਸ਼ਬੈਕਸ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮੁੜ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਰਹਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੜ੍ਹਾਈ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਇਫੈਕਟ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ਼ਿਪਾਂ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਆ and it's not very healthy. So
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ I think I would endorse everything. ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਹੂੰਗਾ ਵੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਨਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਡਿਸੀਜਨਸ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਨੈਰੋ ਜੇ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਮੂਹ ਦੇਖਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸਮੂਹ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਆ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵਾਈਡਰ ਕੰਟੈਕਸਟ ਦੇਖੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਭਵਿੱਖ ਦੇਖੋ ਲੁੱਕ ਟੂ ਦ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਅੱਜ ਤਾਂ ਬੱਚਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਫੇਵਰ ਕਰੂਗਾ ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਬੱਚਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਸੱਚ ਗਲੀਆਂ ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ ਉਹ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦਾ ਵੀ ਤੂੰ ਮੇਰੇ ਮਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਤੂੰ ਤੋੜਤਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤੂੰ 5 ਸਾਲ ਨਰਕ ਚ ਪਾਇਆ ਸੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸ਼ਾਰਟ ਟਰਮ ਨਾ ਦੇਖੋ ਦੂਜੀ ਗੱਲ ਇਹ ਆ ਦੇਖੋ ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ ਨਾਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਪਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਦੀ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਦੋਵਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਆ ਪਰ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਨਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਗੜੋ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਨਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਪਾਪ ਆ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਜੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਦਾ ਮਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਆਰ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਦੂਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਪਾਪ ਆ ਜੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਦਾ ਬਾਪ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਪਿਆਰ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਦੂਰ ਕਰਨਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਪਾਪ ਆ ਤੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਖਾਨਦਾਨੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਦੋਂ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਜ਼ਤ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਆਕੜ ਯੂ ਨੋ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਭਾਈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਆਕੜ ਆ ਨਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹਦਾ ਕਚਹਿਰੀਆਂ ਕਚੂਰੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨਾ ਉਹੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਆਕੜ ਵਾਲੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਮੰਗਤਿਆਂ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਫਿਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਚਾ ਲਓ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਸ਼ੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਸੋ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫਾਲਸ ਬਲੰਡਰ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਪਾਸੇ ਤੇ ਰੱਖ ਦੋ ਠੀਕ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹਾਦਰ ਕੌਮ ਆ ਪਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਘਰੇਲੂ ਮਸਲੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਬਹਾਦਰੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ, ਉੱਥੇ ਅਕਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਬਣਦਾ। So thanks to
thank you
both
so
of our
much,
guests.
guys.
It's been a
Yeah,
really important show.
thank
Again, difficult topics, but ਮੇਰਾ
ਬਹੁਤ
ਖਿਆਲ ਇੰਨੇ difficult ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਬਣਾ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ। ਸੋ
ਹਾਰਡ ਬਣਾ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆ।
ਸਾਡੇ ਵਰਗਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਮੇਵਾਰੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੋਰੇ ਲਿਆਈਏ ਤਾਂ we're all in the, ਅਸੀਂ ਇਕੱਠੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਵੀ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਆ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮੱਤਾ ਦੇਣ ਲਈ we here to share, yeah. So
ਹਰੇਕ ਦੀ ਜਰਨੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਆਪਣੀ।
So thanks to the channel. ਅਸੀਂ ਅਗਲੇ ਹਫਤੇ ਫੇਰ ਮਿਲਾਂਗੇ। ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਬੋਲਦੇ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਭੁੱਲ ਚੁੱਕ ਮਾਫ ਕਰਨਾ, ਤਾਂ PBC ਦੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਕਰੋ। ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਇੱਕ ਚੈਨਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਲਿਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਨਿਡਰ ਹੋ ਕੇ। ਸੋ ਫਤਿਹ ਬੁਲਾਓ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ